Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cricket Unfiltered. Hello to those watching on YouTube and to those listening. I'm Andrew Menzel. I'm joined by my co host, Paul Dennett. Paul, what an emotional week for cricket fans.
Yeah, it certainly has been. It's hard to process it still, even these many days out. And I wake up each morning with a sense of sadness, and it's ridiculous, as I said before. I never met Shane Warne. It really shouldn't be having this sort of impact. But I think for a lot of cricket fans and just sports fans in general, it has. And just the shock of someone so full of life dying at such a young age, it's just sad. And I'm not sure when that lingering sadness will end.
Yeah, I was listening back to parts of our show we did the day after we heard the news on Saturday or later that day, and boy, did we both sound worn out and emotional, and just sort of taking in all the reactions since then. As you say, it's really it's really affected me as well as it's affected you. Like seeing Ricky Ponting break down, seeing the emotional responses of all his former teammates. It's just such a great loss. And yeah, there's sort of news, come out that maybe he had heart disease. And there were some warning signs before he went on holiday. But just the most awful thing for his family. I don't know if you caught those statements by his
Yeah.
parents and children, but that was really heart wrenching.
Yeah, definitely. It's just ghastly, and yeah, I mean the reaction aside from the grief is actually bigger than I even expected. Not that I'd ever given it any thought, but when it happened, I knew that this was going to be quite a significant reaction. But especially in England, the level of coverage that it's got was even slightly bigger than I had expected, which further emphasises, apart from the human tragedy, what a great loss it is for cricket. That cricket's most famous person, along with Tendulkar, but I think in the Western world, certainly cricket's most famous person and the most lightning rod for cricket's interest, um, to have him to die is very sad for the sport. Much less sad than the actual tragedy itself, but it is a sad moment for cricket, definitely.
Yeah, and the reaction all around the world's been massive. There was this strange story that emerged where a German woman was somehow allowed to be alone with Warren's body in the back of the ambulance, and actually the ABC were able to catch it on film. Very peculiar. I don't know what was going on there, but just that must be awful for the family. Like, why would you want some stranger being near the body?
It's one of the great indignities of death, I suppose, that you can be rich and powerful in life, but then when something like this happens, suddenly you're at you're in a foreign country. You're sort of subject to the vagaries of that country. That if they want to do an autopsy, they'll do an autopsy. That a beloved person, you're no longer in control of what happens, and it's just one of the many horrible situations. That incident in itself was not significant, but I take your point that it's just a further indignity and sadness, and it's just wrong.
Like, did she take photos in the back there of the body? I mean, I'm just speculating, but just gives me um, goosebumps, thinking about that situation. They have announced that the public memorial service will be on March the 30th, and I think it's going to be at the Melbourne Cricket Ground. I think it'll be a moving occasion.
Yes, and Melbourne usually do these things well, and it deserves to be done extremely well. They should, providing it's safe to do so, get 100,000 people there and make sure that everything goes off without a hitch, that the acoustics are working brilliantly, that all the speakers do a wonderful job, and that it's a fitting memorial for his life. And I'm sure that they will.
Hmm. Yeah, I was just speaking to my wife, and she said to me, "Do I want to go down for it?" Have you thought about going down to Melbourne for the service?
I haven't given it any thought, but it's a possibility. I went across to Adelaide for Bradman's back in 2001 at the Adelaide Oval.
Oh, did you? What was that
Yeah.
like?
Um, it was good on one hand because it was quite nice, but was a very cold night in March. There was rain around. There were only about, I don't know, 2,000 people there, which was fine because we all sat in one of those old sort of terracotta roofed stands that used to exist there, and it looked perfectly nice. But I remember thinking at the time, this deserves a bigger, something bigger than this. But it was nice. It was a highlight. It was great to be there. But I'm sure that the one for Shane Warne, if they do get a packed out MCG, will be a more grander occasion. I think it's partially as well that if Don Bradman had died in 1960, he would have been 52, and if the world of 1960 had the modern sort of style, then it would have been massive. But when someone dies at 92, it's a different feeling, I think.
And yeah, Warren just was such a part of Melbourne life. And I think, yeah, you're right. There'll be a massive crowd there. Maybe you and I should go down together and soak it in, because maybe it'll be cathartic to farewell him. I know I'm going to be writing with the original founder of this podcast, the Australian Cricket Podcast, James McSmith. We're actually going to be writing our story of following the '99 World Cup. And that's going to be published, I think, on the day of the funeral in the Daily Telegraph. So, just thinking back over all the memories of Warne and his great bowling. I mean, that's what I've loved watching this last week. It's just his craft with the ball. I mean, that was every time you turn on the highlights of him bowling, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I agree. That's great that you're getting that published. That's really good for you. Well done to you and Macca. I look forward to reading that. And yeah, definitely, I'd give some serious consideration to going down. I haven't given any thought till now, but yeah, it's something I would consider doing. And you're right around the highlights as well. That I thought that I knew every wicket that he'd taken, but in looking back at all these highlights, 708 plus the however many in the one dayers, it was about 1,000 altogether. There are quite a lot. And I saw one yesterday when he took 7 for 22 against Pakistan in 95-96. And that was a match that I'd largely forgotten. But, some of the balls that he bowled in that were incredible. And that's when someone who I think I watched probably every single ball he bowled in Australia and almost every ball he bowled overseas. And I thought I had a good memory. For a 7 for 22 to be totally forgotten is an example of just how much he did.
Yeah. And, just incredible. I mean, I've loved the on Fox Sports when Shane Warne and Mark Howard, they sat down during the first lockdown in 2020 and did some extensive kind of podcasts. They were like, a couple of hours talking in depth through games. I've caught a couple of them and I've enjoyed it, but it's a bit hard watching Warne at the moment. I've got to say, talking, like, I just can't believe he's not here still. It's still sinking in. And yeah, the other reaction I caught was Michael Clarke. We know he and Warne are very close. He said some very moving things on Channel 9's Today Show. So yeah, look, I don't know if you want to add much more to it. I want to cover the test and all the cricket news, but yeah, just, I want to send my love to all the cricket fans out there that this is affected. I know it's gone right around the world, and I've just got Warnie's kids in my thoughts at the moment because of what they're going through, and his parents and his ex-wife. But yeah, just sending my love to all the fans out there that are, missing Warnie like we are.
Yeah, it is very hard watching him in those recent interviews because he just seems so fit and healthy and full of life and energy. So it's a tough watch.
Alrighty, so change your tone. We're going to get into the cricket headlines. See that excellent segue, and we've got some show news. So Jaleesa Apps is still part of the show. She's not here today, but she is starting a radio show, which is going to be on SEN on Sundays. I think it's going to be like Sunday Crunch Time with Jaleesa Apps, and I think her co-host is going to be Stephen O'Keefe. Now, I was supposed to be commentating with O'Keefe this week, but we were cancelled. But I did spend enough time with him to just feed him a lot of Jaleesa information about Burua, about her technical ineptitude, and a few other things. I'll just let be surprised for her when they get on air. But really looking forward to that. She will be back on Cricket Unfiltered, but she's been pulled from pillar to post at the moment.
Yeah, as I said last show, it's fantastic that she's getting a weekend show with Stephen O'Keefe. And so, yeah, I encourage everyone to listen on SEN.
And yeah, Stephen O'Keefe didn't even know about this podcast. So I don't know if Jaleesa tells anyone she's on a cricket podcast, but I guess that's what happens when you're on TV and stuff. And the other news is we've got an intern, Paul. Now I'm going to bring in James. We've tarred and feathered him on the last show, but we've let him out of that now. So we've got James Muggeridge. James, welcome to Cricket Unfiltered. Thanks for offering to be our intern.
Thank you, Manners. No, it's great to be a part of it. Been watching it for a bit now, and yeah, it's exciting.
Excellent. Well, we'll work on the delivery and the content, but really glad that you're our intern. James actually reached out and offered. You've just finished studying. You're going to be doing an internship soon. So I think it's great to have you on board working with us, and we will weave you into the odd show as you find your feet with Cricket Unfiltered. But yeah, thanks very much.
No, thank you, Manners. Yeah, very, very excited.
All right, that was James. We'll get rid of him. Look, he's got potential. And I actually said to James, he doesn't have to hang around for the whole recording, but he is producing a series for us on social media called the Captain Series. So Cricket Unfiltered has, had over a dozen Australian captains, and he's going to be producing highlights of those interviews over the next couple of months. So keep an eye out for that one on our social medias. All right, let's get into the cricket headlines brought to you by Piccolo Podcasts. Well, Australia and Pakistan played out a laborious draw with the game going the full 5 days. Pakistan made 476 for 4 declared. Australia replied with 459. And then on the last day, Pakistan were none for 252, with Shafiq making 136 and Imam al-Haq making 111, making that twin centuries for Inzamam al-Haq's relative in that game. Paul, what are your impressions of the match?
Well, two very different impressions. Number one, it was a triumph. The crowd was superb. It was wonderful to see cricket back involving Australia and Pakistan after 24 years. The match went off without a hitch. The vibe between both sets of players it's what I want cricket to be. And I was really, really heartened by that. I love it. There was full-on competitiveness. There was some searing bounces that Shaheen Sharafreddy was delivering, and Nasim Shah was delivering as well. There was no quarter asked and none given. But in and around that, there was none of the nonsense that I've seen in so many times with Australia in the past. That there was a point on the final day where Shafiq defended a ball. It was sort of bouncing around on the crease or rolling around on near the stumps, and it had almost come to a stop, and he picked it up and threw it to the Australians. Now, I have seen in the past when a ball has been stationary 2 meters from the stumps, and a player from the batting side has gone to pick it up and throw it to the Australians, and they've screamed at him, "Don't touch it," because they had this whole mindset of, that's our ball, it's our sacred ball, we will keep it, and don't you dare touch it. And they were kind of carrying on like pork chops. This time, for a microsecond, Steve Smith at first slip looked aggrieved, and then both he and Carey just started chuckling because there's no reason not to chuckle. The ball wasn't going to go back onto the stumps. Probably he should have waited another second before picking it up. Maybe he shouldn't have picked it up at all, but it was harmless, and it was nice to see that reaction. So on so many fronts, it was a triumph for cricket. Pakistan can say, we played well. You guys couldn't get us out. We got you out. So maybe if you'd taken a few more wickets, it would have been better. But on to point two, you just can't say anything other than the fact that the pitch was unacceptable. It was too boring. We criticised the hell out of the MCG pitch in 2017. We've criticised the SCG on numerous occasions. We've criticised various other grounds in Australia for being slow and low. My friends, some of whom I use as barometers of cricket, some of whom don't watch a lot, were very eager to watch this match because of all the hype around it. And then I'll tell you what, they're not watching the second test match. I can promise you that. And for all the Pakistanis who say, well, that's the way it goes, you've shot yourself in the foot a little bit, because for future TV rights and for future interest, if this had been a really entertaining pitch and produced an entertaining match, would have been so much better. So hopefully we see something better in the second test in Karachi. But yeah, very, very different views overall on the match.
Mm. I hated this match. I did not get into it at all. I was disgusted at Australia's team selection. I thought it was insipid to go in with three quicks. Cummins has got to get used to the fact that he's going to have to tap Hazelwood and Stark on the shoulder one time, even though they're his mates and saying they're resting or missing a game. So I didn't get into the game at all because that first day was so boring. And as you say, the pitch was lifeless. But then I've got to say the Shane Warne news kind of sucked a bit of the oxygen out of the whole contest for me. Wasn't quite in the right frame of mind to really get into it. So I want to put that out there. But I mean, let's start with the pitch. I said to you and Barrett on our preview that there's no way Pakistan will leave any life in that pitch. And I was right. And since the game, the Pakistan Cricket Board chairman, Ramesh Raja, and this is Pete Lawler writing in the News Corp papers, that Ramesh Raja has conceded that Pat Cummins was right and the historically bad pitch at Rawalpindi was designed to blunt the Australian bowling attack. And then Raja also said that he's looking to improve the pitches in Pakistan, but he's just got the job and soil is coming from Australia. So if we go there in 4 years, Paul, we might have Australian wickets over there. So that would be good. So I do not think it is good when Pakistan do what they did and just take all the life out of the wicket and ruin the contest. But I think they kind of needed to go further and like scuff it up, make it spin, at least do something. If you're not going to leave any life for the quicks, go the other way and do what the Sri Lankans did. Get a broom with metal. Like, didn't the Sri Lankans take a broom with, metal bristles and just brush the top of the pitch? I mean, maybe they could have done something like that. But what we got, as you say, was unsatisfactory. It was very, very tough to watch.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in that. I suppose it's important to look at it from the Pakistan point of view as well, and to say, okay, we haven't had one of the big three in generations. We've finally got Australia back here now. You look at the side, and they've got how many players ranked in the top 10 with both bat and ball. People are saying this is not a great Australian side. It's not far short of it. You look at some of the players in there: Warner, Smith, and Labuschagne, plus Hazelwood, Stark, Cummins, throw in Lyon. And, when you've got a side where some of the weaknesses are sort of like Travis Head, who's a very, very fine player, it's a pretty good side. And I suppose Pakistan were thinking, we don't really want to get humiliated on our return. That Australia destroyed England. We don't want that to happen to us. So I can understand from that point of view where you haven't had any cricket or virtually no cricket in your country for so long, it could make you feel rather conservative. So I'm kind of willing to give them a get out of jail free card on this one, but I really want to see something in the second test in Karachi. But as a secondary point, I always make this point. I object to the notion that home ground means that you prepare the pitches to suit yourself. And everyone says, oh, but the Australians do that. We actually don't. Our pitches are produced to try to make good cricket. And of course, they have an inherent advantage to us because they're the pitches that we have grown up playing on. But they're the same, by and large, year in, year out. Yeah, sure, sometimes you get a bit of a dud and the SCG has stopped spinning a little bit. But when the West Indies were at their height, we didn't make the whacker slow, and which we should have done if we were going to do that. When Warne was at his height, we didn't make the whacker a raging turner. We kept things fairly consistent. And I think that if Pakistan had just produced the best pitch they could have at Rawalpindi, then it would have been a much better spectacle. And ironically, as you said, Menas, they might have actually won the game because I think Australia actually take plenty out of this. I know we went for 180 runs per wicket. It's the second most runs conceded per wicket in the history of cricket, in the history of Test cricket. But 3 out of 4 occasions that we've been to the UAE and they've batted first, they've got a big score, we've been rolled. And the fourth time we only survived due to a miraculous century from Usman Khawaja. This was a match we should have lost. They got 460 for not many declared. We should have got bowled out for 200. They should have slapped 200 and then rolled us on the last day. So I think Australia, although our bowling attack looked impotent, can go to the second test feeling, yeah, actually, we're feeling okay about things.
I agree with that last point about the Australians. I don't think Lyon will be too happy with his game, but all the batters got some time out there apart from Head. So that's really good for the next match. And because of the astute captaincy on the last day, Stark, Hazelwood, Cummins, even Lyon didn't bowl that much on the 5th day. Just sort of moving back to the cricket and what we were saying about the brand. I mean, the point was made. I heard Damien Fleming talking about the 94 and 98 tours, that it was actually very similar cricket then, that there weren't a lot of results. I think there was only 2 results in 6 test matches across 2 series. And one of them was the last wicket result in 94, where Inzamam al-Haq came down the wicket and missed that ball. And Healy missed the stumping,
Greatest
that
keeper
famous...
of all time. Oh, no, maybe
Greatest
Gilchrist
keeper.
was better. Maybe Gilchrist
And
was a
then
better golfer.
triggered, #triggered. And then in 98, I think Australia won the first test match against in Rawalpindi, but then the rest were drawn, and we did see a lot of batting. So I guess the sort of character of the game is not actually far removed from what traditional test cricket is like in Pakistan. The only thing I will say is, though, I thought Pakistan were disappointing in the first innings. Once they got on top, I think they could have tried to move the game a bit further on with their... I mean, they made 460 odd. It was almost 2 days. And I think they could have put the foot down a bit earlier and just tried to rack up that score a bit quicker and have a bit more time bowling at Australia.
Look, I take your point and Fleming's point that this is kind of typical for Test cricket in Pakistan. And I'd say that, therefore, now's the time to change that, because this is typical. It's not good. I mean, what's the average daily crowd for test matches in the history of Pakistan? I don't know what it is, but it wouldn't be very many. People aren't stupid. People don't want to watch this. This was not watchable. And that's not to take away anything from the way that the Pakistani batters played. And, of course, that they took loads of wickets. They took 10 wickets. We only took 2. But if you produce an attractive pitch and the next 2 test matches result in Australia winning thrilling games and Pakistan lose the series 2-0, that's a better result for Pakistan than if they produce 2 roads and Pakistan sneak a win and there's a draw and they win the series 1-0. The 2-0 series lost to Australia in highly competitive cricket with the eyeballs of the world watching it will redeem Test cricket in Pakistan. As it stands, before this show, I was saying I want to go to Pakistan. Before this Test match, I want to go to Pakistan to watch Test cricket one day. I still do for the culture and everything else. But as things stand, I'm thinking, well, the actual cricket itself is going to be a punish, and I'm not sure if I'm so keen on that.
Maybe, yeah, you're right. What did you think about the Australian decision not to pick a second spinner? It just floored me. You've got Travis Head bowling before lunch on the first day. I don't understand why there was not a second spinner picked. I would have had Swepson, Lyon, and then the 2 quicks, probably Stark and Cummins, but you could go Hazelwood, Cummins. I mean, it just seemed like such a weak selection, and it was proved to be wrong so quickly. Poor Nathan Lyon, he bowled 52 overs in the first innings, 26 in the second. I mean, just too much for him to do, too much pressure on him to take the wickets.
I think it was... I agree. I think it was the disappointing team chosen, but entirely predictable. This is Australia's cricket great strength and our great weakness. The
conservative.
Yeah, anti-intellectualism even. Like, no. This is our side. We won in India in 2004, picking our best side. That's what we're going to do. And so I thought that was the wrong thing to do then, and I think it was the wrong thing to do. But it wasn't unexpected. I don't think it's the biggest issue. And quite frankly, I don't think it really mattered who we picked. This game was probably always, sadly, going to end in a draw. But it's going to be interesting what they do in the second test. There is talk that they are going to pick Swepson. And look, I know it's not going to happen, and I don't want to sound like I'm, mindlessly bashing Nathan Lyon. But, if you were forced, Menners, to put your life on the result of the next test match, would you pick Nathan Lyon? I mean, if the pitch looks like it's roughly similar to this, I know that Karachi tends to spin more. But looking at the figures, across the UAE and Pakistan, where the conditions have been fairly similar, Nathan Lyon averages 65, and he takes his wickets 1 every 126 balls. I think they should seriously consider picking Agar and Swepson for the next test.
Well, that's an astounding but not surprising call from you, Paul. And look, it even highlights why you shouldn't go in with just one spinner to that first test match, because the Lions' record is no good. I would stick with Lyon.
Even if your life was on the line.
Yeah, if my life was on the line, because I don't rate Agar I don't rate my life or Agar very highly as a red ball bowler. I do think Lyon is a better red ball bowler. I think there was too much pressure on him. But look, you're right. He's got a concerning record, but it was a flat pitch, nothing in it.
Let me just say, I agree. I rate Lyon as a much better red ball bowler than Agar. And Lyon's record in Australia is it's second only to Warne's. And every spinner except for Lyon and Warne in Australia get pummeled. So he's done really, really well. I just think in these subcontinental conditions, a left arm orthodox with a bit more of the trajectory of a little bit quicker through the air like Agar might do better. I'm not saying that I don't think Lyon will do okay. He might do quite well in the second test because if the conditions offer a little bit more, he will come into it. And I don't think he bowled terribly. What I'm saying is, if he takes 8 wickets in the second test match, it's forbidden for you to replay this saying he should be dropped, because I still think that's absolutely fine. I'm just saying on balance, I would put Agar and Swepson in, but I would still have Lyon for future test matches. I'm not saying that's the end for him, obviously. Thank you.
I was saying going into this last summer that maybe Swepson could overtake Lyon as Australia's number one spinner, but that was sort of at the beginning of the summer, and then with COVID and the sort of the way the season worked out in the rain, Swepson hasn't got much of an opportunity. But yeah, love to see him play. Let's talk about the Aussie batting. Lots of positives. Australia made 459, an opening partnership of 156 between Warner and Khawaja. Warner made 68. Khawaja made a heartbreaking 97 in the city he was born in, on the verge of a century, and then he got out reverse sweeping, caught off the glove. 2 great innings though, and then Marnus with 90.
And I think that the thing that was also pleasing about it was that we didn't lose wickets as we've done in the past in the subcontinent, where unplayable balls just ultimately wore us down. You could say, I'm not criticizing the shots that they played necessarily, but they weren't magnificent balls that got them out. Khawaja was reverse sweeping. Warner probably made an error of footwork. Smith was playing a sweep to a fairly negative line outside leg stump. There were not fantastic spin balls that got them out, and Labuschagne got out to the quick. So that was encouraging as well. What I'm saying is Australia got just over 400. I think the way we were batting, we could have even got a lot more, which is not bad, given we'd had no practice whatsoever. It's our first hit out in Pakistan. We'll be better for the run, I think.
Yeah, and Smith 78, missing out on 100 again. He looked really frustrated. I think it's now 27 test innings without a test century for Smith. So he'll be keen to switch that one up. Then Head was out for 8. Look, if you could have scripted a Head dismissal to the tweaker, that's what I would have said. That's what I would have written. Just flat playing at 1, caught behind. Green made a good 48. I thought that was promising signs for him. He's only played in the subcontinent on underage tours, never with Australia. So it was good for him to get used to conditions. Carey, 19, got a Jaffa. So yeah, look, a good performance with the bat. I think a lot to work on going forward.
Yeah, I think it was pretty good. And as I said, in another iteration with another team, Australia might well have got beaten here. So it'll be really interesting to see if the second test does offer more for the spinners, how they go under more challenging conditions. And I was pleased that my man Norman Ali, who I picked out as might be doing okay, got 6 wickets. I took 6 for 100. It wasn't like he went through them, but pretty good return for him.
Absolutely. The other stat that jumped out was the historically bad performance by Australia with the ball. So across 77 overs in the second innings and 162 overs in the first innings, they only took 4 wickets. And there was some stat that's the second worst ever return by a bowling side in Test cricket.
Yes.
So that's not something they'll be happy. And I think this is the only Test match ever where all 3 innings have had a century opening stand.
Yes. And had we gone on to day 8, if Pakistan had declared it 9 for 1,000, Warner and Khawaja might have made it all 4 on day
8. They could have been playing on day 10 and they wouldn't have got a result. What about the next test? So they head to, is it Karachi now or Lahore?
Yes,
Karachi. And Cummins floated the idea that they'll play a second spinner. That would be the only change Australia would make. I guess then the decision comes down to Hazelwood or Stark. Who would you pick?
Oh, I'd drop Stark. And I think it's the one time maybe that Stark might not actually bother, might not be mind being dropped. If I was a fast bowler, I'm dropped. I'm like, oh, darn. Oh, well, but I think that I wouldn't have picked Stark in this game, and I think I'd drop him for the next game. As I said, I'd drop Stark and Lyon and bring in Swepson and Agar. But obviously that's not going to happen. I think that what they will do is probably drop Stark and bring in Swepson. I think that Stark didn't bowl badly. It was just a very, very flat pitch. And I think that up against Hazelwood, as good as Stark is, Hazelwood is better. I disagree with you. The notion that we can't contemplate resting Cummins, that's the wrong way to go around it. You pick your best 11, and then if the captain's in it, he's in it. If he's not, he's not. If Cummins needs to be rested, rest him, and someone else can captain. There's no problem with that whatsoever. We saw it this summer. It's not the end of the world. I'm not saying that I wouldn't pick him, but he shouldn't be an automatic selection.
I think the fact that he's got the best bowling record in history probably means you should pick him.
You did like a different point. Are you starting a new conversation on a different point?
No.
Why didn't you respond to my point?
I was saying,
you started talking about something else. You extrapolated from what I said to infer that I was implying that he's not the best, one of the best bowlers ever. Of course he is. I'd say he needs to be considered on his.
Oh yeah, of course.
And I'd pick him. But you've said previously he's the captain, so therefore he has to play. I reject that. I rejected that with Mark Taylor all those years ago, and I reject it now with Cummins.
Yeah, I think he will play.
Of course he will play.
I'm joking. What interesting point Damien Fleming made on the radio this week was that if you look at the balance of the attack, if you say pick Swepson, you'd be better off picking Hazelwood, because say Swepson leaks a few runs, you probably don't want Stark, who's a bit erratic at times, as you're rather quick. So the balance of the attack will be better suited. Hazelwood, Cummins, Lyon, Swepson with Green as your fifth. Do you think Australia can win the next match?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously conditions, as we were sort of told leading into this match that Rawalpindi was going to have a bit of on offer for the quicks, and it kind of ended up having nothing on offer for anyone. We've also been told that Karachi is going to have a bit more on offer for the spinners. Let's see what we get. But if it is a pitch that is slightly more giving to the spinners and there's a little bit more there, yeah, if Australia get the better of conditions, then they certainly can win it. They're a very, very good side. I think it's almost a toss of the coin. If there's going to be a result, if you said to me, definitely there's going to be a result in this next test, I'd say Pakistan 60-40, but only that, very close.
Yeah, I mean, what did you think of Sajid Khan and Nauman Ali?
I've heard Gideon Haig saying he really likes Sajid Khan's head. He looks like he's borrowed Shikhar Dhawan's moustache. I really like him. I like his action, and it triggered me a few years ago when Steve Smith was showing Clary Grimmett's action and sort of chuckled and said, doesn't use his front arm much, and then kind of said, well, I suppose, Dean Elgar's got me out a few times. Like, Clary Grimmett, one of the greatest bowlers ever, but grainy footage from the 1920s doesn't really do him justice. I think it's the same thing with this guy, that you just look at where's his front arm gone, but then he's got a fair bit of power coming out of that arm. But I think, Ali looked the better of the two, and I think that's why, I like the notion of a left-arm orthodox bowler in these conditions.
I think if there is a bit of spin or uneven bounce at Karachi, we could be in trouble. I just think they're the type of bowlers that could trouble us. They just seem to, they just attack the stumps. Not a lot. There wasn't a lot in that pitch, but I think if you had a bit of life in the pitch, Australia would get beaten on both sides of the bat like Jadeja does.
And that's what I'm saying, where I'm not saying Agar's anywhere near as good as Jadeja, but I think he's improved a lot. And I just still, I said it in one of the other podcasts, when I had a little bit of money on Sri Lanka in one of the T20s, and they brought Agar on, I thought, oh, God. And it was proven right. It was just too good for them. And I know it's test cricket and a million miles away and everything else. I just think him bowling left arm round the wicket, aiming it at the stumps, some nibble away a bit, some go straight on with that extra pace. That's the sort of trajectory that can get wickets in the subcontinent. But, yeah, I don't think they're going to play.
All righty. Well, the match starts on Saturday night, Australian time. Looking forward to that.
Just before we get to that, I don't know how much of the actual commentary you listen to. I listened to a fair bit of it, but at times I had to mute it. I don't want to be overly critical because he wasn't terrible, but I found Kastrovic a bit boring. I haven't heard of him in a long time, and he struck me as like he's like someone has gone and got him before the match to record 147 typical things to create a video game, and then they've just pressed play on the right ones. Like he just says exactly what you'd expect. And I'm not sure how much Test cricket he's watched over the years. Like some of the things that he seemed a bit surprised by. I thought, not saying he hasn't watched a game since he retired, but he told that story. The cliche we always laugh at. Oh, did you realize Steve Smith was picked as a leg spinner originally? But he told that story, but he adjusted the principle to Marnus Labuschagne. He said, initially I think he was picked as a leg spinner for Australia. And I was thinking, I don't think he was.
No, he wasn't.
I mean, yeah, he bowls with a leg spin, but it was a weird thing to say.
Look, I have to say I didn't listen to a lot of the commentary. It was mainly just listening to podcasts about Shane Warne and crying while I watched the TV. But I actually did listen to the SEN radio commentary. I synced it up. And it was obviously unbiased because Pete Lawler's on it, who I love, and Adam Collins, who I'm a big fan of. And then they had Waqar Younis and Isabel Westbury. And I actually found the SEN coverage exceptional. And our good friend Barrett Sundararayan will be joining the commentary. We prepped him last week with the preview podcast here, and then we sent him into the fire. Hope he makes it back okay.
He's got the visa.
He's there. He's there.
Oh,
he's
fantastic.
He's over there. So sent him a message this morning. Glad you're over there. And so we'll hear him commentating. So I actually really enjoyed the radio commentary if you want a break from the TV.
Well, no, I mean, Kasparov wasn't terrible. I just thought, I'd like him to add a bit more life. But I thought the rest of them were quite good. I really like Basid Khan from Pakistan. I always have liked him. I like Hazeman. I really like Rob Key. I think he's excellent. And Kadich is really good. Waqar Younis, I could take him 11, but he's okay. Who's the other guy? I've forgotten the other person's name. I'll come up with it in a second. I don't want to forget their name.
Okay.
One last thing before I forget it. Did you see the promotion they've got with the KFC bucket?
No, what happened?
Oh, KFC are geniuses. They've got this bucket that's not that big, and how many sixes are hit in a test match? It's not going to get hit. It's not going to get hit. And if you hit it, you should get like $10 million or something. But if you hit it, they promise to give one worthy student a scholarship to college. And it's like, am I hearing that right? Did they say what? Surely they said 1,000. They're going to give one student a scholarship to a college if this highly
better be Harvard or Princeton or one of those Ivy Leagues for that.
And one time, and the commentators have clearly been prepped to talk it up, because at one point a six was hit and it missed the sign by about 47 meters. And they go, "Oh, did that almost hit the bucket?" It's like, no, that didn't hit the bucket, because the bucket's at square leg, and that went through wide bit on.
I mean, it reminds me of that great comp in the old 50 over competition in Australia, where the domestic one, where they had the signs. And I think Steve Waugh hit one, Shane Lee maybe.
Yeah, but at least Steve Waugh hit one and got like 140 grand.
Yeah.
Back in the day when 140 grand, especially if they prorated it around the state players, for some of them who were earning, peanuts, their share of it, 12 grand or whatever they got, would have been almost a life-changing amount of money.
Put the kids through college.
Exactly. Maybe that's where they got the idea from for this one.
Yeah. All righty, can we move on to the Women's World Cup now?
Yes.
So it started really well with some exciting games. Look, we're recording on Thursday, the what's the date today? The 10th of March. So there's games every day, but as it stands, Australia and the West Indies are on top of the ladder, both 2 wins from 2 matches. India won their first game against Pakistan. South Africa won their first game. New Zealand 1-1, lost 1. England 0 from 2. But what's really stood out is the quality of the cricket so far has been of such a high standard. And already there's been 3 exceptionally thrilling games. I'll run through them quickly. West Indies beat New Zealand in the opener by just 3 runs. The West Indies made 9 for 259. Hayley Matthews, 119 for 128 deliveries. And then New Zealand were bowled out for 256, despite Sophie Devine making 108. Then in Australia's first game, they played England and beat them by just 12 runs, with Australia making 3 for 310. Rachel Haynes, 130 a brilliant innings. And then in reply, England fell 12 short, 8 for 298. They almost had the game in the bag, but Nat Siver made a brilliant 109 not out. But in the end, they just choked again, a bit like the test match. And then yesterday, as we record this, the West Indies beat England by 7 runs. So that's 3 games with just very tight results. The West Indies 6 for 225. England all out for 218. Not a good start for England. Great start for the tournament and great start for the Windies, Paul.
Oh, it's really heartening because I, and along with most people, kind of were subscribing to that theory. Well, it's Australia, New Zealand, England, and India, and the rest are going to make up the numbers. So the fact that the West Indies have got away to such a great start, that first game against New Zealand was quite a chaotic affair. Where New Zealand, with when Devine got out, they were gone. Then they put on a late order partnership to the point where they had it won. They only needed 6 off the final over, and they contrived to lose 3 wickets in the final over and not win the game. So yeah, really exciting start there, and great to see that. The West Indies are doing well. My tip of the dark horse of Pakistan have had a shocker, 2 losses and got pretty badly beaten by India, although India were struggling, and then had a middle order partnership that got them up to a decent score. So yeah, I've kind of been, unfortunately, because of Warne and because of the first test, haven't been watching as much of it as I would have otherwise liked to, but I'm definitely keen to really get into it now. Just back on what I was saying before, now that I've actually looked it up, it's Aruj Mumtaz is the other commentator, and she's pretty good as well. So I just wanted to cycle back to that.
Of course. Hope she's listening. So like you haven't really got into the Women's World Cup for the last few days, just been putting it on every day. It's on KO Freebie. So everybody listening in Australia, everybody watching, can watch it for free on KO Freebies, and you can also watch me commentating on Grey Cricket. So it's a win-win. So look, let's keep an eye on that tournament as it progresses. Staying on 50 over cricket and moving a bit closer to home, the domestic 50 over competition has its finalists decided. So Western Australia are playing New South Wales at Junction Oval on Friday, the 11th of March. So tomorrow, it's a repeat of last year's final. In last year's final, New South Wales beat WA on the back of a Jack Edwards century and a very slow Daniel Hughes knock. I don't know if you remember, you, me, and Jaleesa trading messages that day about what was Hughes doing. Well, New South Wales won by almost 100 runs, so Hughes certainly knew what he was doing. But the funny thing about this is New South Wales make the final. They had 6 games scheduled. 4 of them were washouts. They only played 2 and they won them. So the way the sort of average points per game works out, they get through to the final against WA.
Yeah, it's weird. I can't believe that's a year ago. I remember that I was playing basketball with my daughter and we're messaging, looking at the scores and messaging. And I was watching Ollie Davies go and getting angry when he got out. It seems like about yesterday. But yeah, it's been ridiculous, the weather in New South Wales these last few weeks. That I find it amazing that the game that you were set to commentate on Tuesday at North Sydney Oval,
yes,
that they didn't call it off before the game. Like it was every other game. I was set to commentate a game in the Women's National, the WNCL, and they called that off on the 3 days before because they said algae was growing on the on the ground. Like we went through a bicycle ride the other day. And then saw footage a couple of days later that people where we'd been riding their bikes were riding jet skis, literally. That's how much rain has occurred in Sydney. So the drainage at North Sydney Oval, the fact that they hadn't called that before, the drainage must be the best on the planet. And then on that Tuesday, we ended up getting about 1,000 millilitres of rain anyway. So it was well and truly washed out in the end.
Well, on Hurstville Oval, where you were supposed to commentate, I did see footage of people doing bombs onto the oval because the water gathers around the bike track on the edges. So you could do your laps around the oval swimming. And with North Sydney Oval, the crazy thing was you have no idea how dumb I felt doing this, Paul, because it was pouring with rain, but I still had to drive from my house to North Sydney Oval. I'm driving through torrential rain. I get to the car park and it's flooded. Like it's literally, there's half a foot of water in the car park. So I had to, park on a higher level. I, wade through the heavy rain, get to North Sydney Oval, then stops raining. And actually, once it stopped raining, the water did start to disappear, but the ground was stuffed. I mean, there were mud patches on each end. You not play cricket there at all. So I was there for like half an hour, and then I saw the 2 captains shaking hands, and that was it. And then I drove home.
So That's the freelancer's dream.
And then I drove home and it was raining the whole way. So you're right, it was very strange. But yeah, so that final, it's a star-studded Western Australian side. I think they've got 9 or 10 international players in their team, so they'll be hard to beat. I am looking forward to seeing how Ollie Davies, Jack Edwards, Jason Sanger, these youngsters go against Jai Richardson and Jason Berendorf in a really big game.
Yeah, it's hard to get excited about it because of the fact that it's been so deprioritized because of the Big Bash. But when you mention it like that, you've done well. You've got me enticed to give it a bit of a go.
I'll be watching it, and I've got to say I was gutted. That was going to be my first ever Marsh Cup 50 over game commentating, so that was ripped away from me. And I can sort of say I didn't. You didn't call a ball this week. I didn't call a ball this week. So
yeah, but you were there. I mean, the one day I've ever taken my daughter to the cricket was the final day of the 2017-18 Border Gavaskar Trophy at the SCG, which was, as it turned out, not a ball bowled. So she's been to the cricket, but she's never seen a ball. But she's been there the first time ever that Australia lost to Asian opposition in Australia in a Test series. So I'm not sure she's only 5. I'm not sure if she appreciated the history of it at the time. But she's been to a significant moment in cricket, yet never seen a ball live.
Did she appreciate Shastri after the game going, "A bullet across the Pacific"? I'll never forget that. I was glad I went for that, just for that press conference. All right, now, next cricket headline. There's been a swathe of new laws brought in by the MCC. So what are the laws stuck out to you, Paul? Which of the laws? Excuse my language.
I think that the two that really stuck out were the fact that you can no longer use saliva on the ball, and also that you no longer have to worry about whether or not the batter's crossed in terms of choosing which end to go to. And I think that last one's a really pragmatic one and a real breath of fresh air, that it's like, it seems right that if they've crossed, yes, the new batter should be on strike. But then it's like, it doesn't matter. It's not like Mars is watching us and judging us. We can do whatever we want. If we want to change the laws to make it easier for us, there's not going to be intergalactic consequences. So I think that's something that the 100 brought in, and it doesn't happen very often, but it's just a nice, pleasant change. And it means that if you've top-edged one and it's going straight up in the air, where you've been encouraged, go to cross and cross and everything, you can just stand there in disappointment and watch as it's caught without moving.
Is a fire alarm going off in your house? Are your cricket takes? Can you hear a beep, or is it from
there's
my
a truck.
end?
There's a truck out in the road.
I thought your hot cricket takes had set the smoke alarm off or something. Yeah, I agree with you. There's no reason to change it. There's no reason not to change it.
Yes.
Just because it's been done a certain way doesn't mean we can get the game better. And I heard Greg Chappell use this analogy: is if we were starting from zero, like what would we do? Baseball. And there's a lot of things in cricket we wouldn't do. Yeah. Basketball and soccer. And I think it actually is better for the game. Why waste time working out if batters have crossed? I think having the new batter on strike all the time is good. It leads to more excitement. Will he get out? All that sort of thing. So in the end, great stuff. Great decision. This is one that jumped out at me that I don't really understand. Law 21.4. Bowling throwing towards striker's end before delivery. If a bowler throws the ball in an attempt to run out the striker before entering their delivery stride, it will now be a dead ball. This is an extremely rare scenario, which has until now been called as a no ball. Have you ever seen a bowler run in, stop before he bowls, and chuck the ball at the striker's end?
Yes.
When?
Once.
When? Tell me.
It was one of the very first things I ever saw in cricket. Jeff Lawson did it. I'm not sure whether I might have even been at the SCG. I'm not sure whether I saw it live or on television, but he ran into bowl, and then I think maybe the batter had preemptively advanced. It might have been right at the end of a one-dayer, and so he just stopped and hurled it to the wicketkeeper, which wasn't doing much good because the wicketkeeper was standing 20 meters back, and everyone went, "That was a bit peculiar." And I've never seen it again. But
well, you'll never see it again now.
30 years later, they've finally that finally closed this gaping hole in the cricketing laws.
I wish I'd seen it now. I wish I'd seen somebody just stop and just throw it at the batter.
Something's going on. There's some sort of roadworks going on outside our house now, so I hope that's not too loud.
No, I can't hear it.
All right.
A couple of other laws that I think are good. They've said now that if a fielding side is caught moving the field after the bowler's started his delivery, instead of it being a dead ball, it'll now be a penalty of 5 runs to the batting side. And that makes sense because it's on the fielding side to have the fielders in the right spot. It
is funny, though. It's, again, a solution to a problem that doesn't really exist. Like, you can throw in the law about this change to the one that we just described, where you can't throw it. If you throw it at the to try to run the strike route, it's now going to be a dead ball rather than no ball. The fake fielding law that they brought in a few years ago that saved, if you don't stop the ball but then pretend to throw it, that's a penalty of 5 runs. That A, never happens, and B, if it did, it doesn't really matter. And the other one they changed, where years ago, if you run in and you knock the stumps over in your active bowling, that again, which wasn't a problem, but that now became a no ball. And you think, why don't they just do something about over rates and actually do something that needs to be fixed? Fix the pitches rather than these obscure things. I mean, there's nothing wrong with fixing these, but God, there's a few other things that are crying out to be fixed.
And then semantics entered it, where they've moved man-catting. I use that expression in inverted commas. They've moved running out the non-striker from being a law of unfair play to just a run out.
Yeah. This probably satisfies some people. Some people get really exercised by this. They say, if the batter is out of his crease, then it's fair play for the bowler. And I agree with that. And it shouldn't be a stigma. I agree with that. And they shouldn't call it after man-cat because he's a good player. He doesn't deserve his name to be associated with that. I agree with that. I just don't care. It's like, I get worked up about a lot of things. The whole man-catting debate, I just couldn't care less either way.
Yeah, I just think the batter's got to stay in his crease. Like,
bowlers I'm fine for them to make this change.
Bowlers can't bowl no balls. Why should batters be able to get a head start?
I'm fine to make this change in the same way I'd be fine to find a 5-cent piece on the ground. It's like, okay.
What if it was a $2 coin? Would it then go above this? Then it's above the man-cat change?
Yes. I'd rather find a $2 coin on the ground and this law go back to what it was. But I'd rather the fixed over rates than find a $1,000 check on the ground payable to cash. I'd surrender that if they could fix the over rate problem and the pitches problem.
So you're walking along and you see a check for $300,000 and they say to you, look, we can fix over rates, pitches, and DRS if you just leave that check here. What do you do?
I said 1,000. You added the 300,000.
Yeah. I want to get a figure.
If it was 300,000, I would cash that check rather than have world peace. I'm generous to a point, but the $300,000 check,
That's ahead of cricket. That's ahead of cricket.
I don't like to say what I would do for that.
All righty, well, that was the cricket headlines.
One last thing on that.
Yes.
The saliva one, I know it's now become kind of de facto, that's the way the world is going. I just think it's a strange thing that when the pandemic first came in and they said one of the solutions is we're not going to allow saliva on the ball, you and I and everyone sort of said, oh, is that going to reduce the level of swing? And now it's just like, oh, well, we just seem to be okay with it. And I'm fine with that, but I think that the bowlers need something in return. I think it's time to say, if it's clipping, it's out as far as LBWs are concerned. There was that one in the match here where Imam Al-Haq was LBW given not out, and it was umpire's call on impact and umpire's call actually at the wickets themselves. That's the sort of thing that, like tennis, just if it's a millimetre, it's out. I think the game would be better. And again, people would say, oh, but what about the benefit of the doubt and all these things? We can do what we want, just as we change the non-striking, the who faces the next ball rule if they have crossed or not. Change this, makes it clearer and cleaner and a better game, and the bowlers need something.
Yeah, I think the point in the release about it was that sweat does just as good a job as saliva, so they've mandated it. So if that's what the bowlers are saying, they've probably got feedback from bowlers that say doesn't make a difference.
Are they then? For 150 years, they could have just been using sweat rather than saliva. Like, that's pretty dumb, isn't it?
Yeah, but you've always said cricketers aren't the sharpest tools in the shed, so proves your point. All righty, that's the cricket headlines brought to you by Piccolo Podcast. If you're watching live, put in any questions for us now. We're about to do Can't Let It Go, but a couple of things before we get to that. Firstly, if you haven't already, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Oz Cricket Pod, AUS Cricket Pod. That's where there'll be all the Captain Series social media posts. Also, if you have a moment, do us a favor, go and leave a review for Cricket Unfiltered on whatever podcast app you listen to the show. And finally, we are looking for sponsors for 2022. So if you do want to purchase ad reads for Cricket Unfiltered, get in touch at ozcricketpod@gmail.com, auscricketpod@gmail.com, or just hit us up through social media.
And I'll refer you back
Paul,
to our what I said before. What I'd do for $300,000, I will take that same logic to sponsors. So if you're
if you want
no
some
matter
crazy
what product
stuff,
you offer,
we're in. We just want the money. Paul, where
my
can
dream
they find?
would be for the BCCI to sponsor us, so that I could start then parroting BCCI propaganda with the biggest smile on my face of all time.
That IPL was the best ever. Where can they find you on social media, Paul?
Twitter is Paul Dennett _.
The summer game is gone, my friends. And I'm at Ameners, AMENNERS. All right, let's get into Can't Let It Go. I might do mine first, Paul.
Yep.
And then we'll get into yours. So, look, I went to the doctor maybe 10 days ago, and the GP was saying, you're 45, you're due for a blood test, go and do it. And I have this terrible fear of having blood taken. I'm sure some listeners have the same fear. I just hate it. Last time I did it, I passed out, I vomited. So I haven't done it for a while. And my doctor was like, you really need to go and get a blood test. And since the death of Shane Warne, it's made me steadfast that, look, I can't put this off any longer. Take some Valium, take the thing to numb your arm, and just go and get the blood taken to make sure everything's okay. So, look, if you're in your 40s or 50s, go, just go and see your GP. I think it's a wake-up call for all middle-aged men.
I agree with that. And unless you're, I don't think you need to do those things. You don't need to numb the arm. You don't need to worry about it taking a Valium. For most people, giving blood, if you haven't done it for ages and you've been afraid, once it's done, you'll go, oh, was that all? Just don't watch it happen and just sit there calmly afterwards. And and the results you'll get most likely will say you're fine, but your cholesterol's a bit high or something. Work on that. And that's the sort of thing that maybe stops you at some point 5 years down the track having a heart attack.
Yeah, exactly. So, I just think it was a wake-up call, and I'm going to make sure I act on it, and I encourage any listeners out there to do the same. Paul, what's your Can't Let It Go?
Well, after you've just given a life or death...
that's why I wanted to go first, because
update.
I didn't want to end the show on such a downer.
No, but
everyone's not listening now. They're on the phone to their GP.
Mine's going to sound really, really significant after that. I think that Norman Ali should have been man of the match.
And get your heart checked.
I just think it's I never normally care, but people do say it's a batter's game, and I think this is a further example of that. Sure, it was a fine double from Imam Al-Haq, 157 and 111 not out, but Azhar Ali made 185. Shafiq made 44 and 136 not out. Khawaja and Labuschagne made 90s. Norman Ali took 6 for 107, so he's taken his wickets at an average of 17.8 runs per wicket. The rest of the bowlers combined took 8 for 1,080. So, across both sides, 8 for 1,080 and an average of 135. So I just think, given that every batter got runs and no bowler got wickets except for one, then the bowler in this instance did deserve to be the player of the match. But when it comes to urging you to get a heart checkup, I'll concede that Menez's Can't Let It Go is more significant than mine.
I think both were very important. Well, that's it for Cricket Unfiltered this week. Thanks to James. James, great show. Nailed it. First job, excellent.
Thank you. I might have froze a little bit, but I'll work on it. I'll work on my live podcast.
We'll get you sounding good. We'll get everything. Thank you. That was James.
And then just before we go as well, thanks to Sharbul Khoury for his little joke in the notes. Pakistan versus Australia first test review. Don't mention it again. we probably won't. That's probably the end of it.
Yeah, and look, I'm going to be commentating on the Sheffield Shield next week, New South Wales v WA. So if you tune into the Shield, you'll hear me gibbering away. So yeah, send me some messages and back next week.
Bye.